Hello, and welcome to National Signing Day. Mallory Hartley, Dave Campbell's Texas Football, alongside Greg Powers, Director of Recruiting at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. And like I said, it's a big, big day. And we kind of already did a show like this back ago a couple of months for early National Signing Day for the class of 2025. But we were talking about this beforehand, and it kind of feels like this episode's a little bit different because we're kind of putting the bow on the class of 2025, saying goodbye to all of the incredible signees in the class of 2025 as they go on and pursue their dreams at the next collegiate level. So shall we get right into it?
Let's go.
All right. We'll start off here. I'll give you a quick rundown of how this is going to look. There's a couple of signees from today that we absolutely have to hit on right off the bat. And then we'll kind of go through and talk about each FBS program in the state of Texas and their top headlines since, I guess, early signing day a couple of months ago. Couple of changes. We'll talk about transfer portal news a little bit, but we'll hit on each FBS team in the state of Texas. Sound good?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
We'll start off strong here. Probably the most notable signee of today. I think people were really tuning in on his commitment and where he was going to go, and that's Denton Ryan offensive tackle Ty Haywood. Now, a little bit of backstory on him. 6'5", 285-pound big body offensive tackle. He was committed to the University of Alabama for a long time. Yeah. I mean, since July of before his senior season. Is that correct?
He was rocking the Alabama gloves when I went and watched Denton Ryan play early in the year. So, I mean, he was locked in with the Tide then.
Locked in with the Tide. And then ever since December, it was middle of December or something, we saw that he decommitted from the University of Alabama. And ever since then, the Michigan Wolverines have been pushing hard for the offensive tackle. And sure enough, they get him today.
Prototype left tackle, a guy who has the length to be a dominant pass blocker, but he also has the strength to set the edge. So I do think he provides some versatility across the offensive front. He could play right tackle. He could potentially bulk up and slide inside and play some interior positions as well. He's extremely quick off the ball, and he was like the landmark piece on a Denton Ryan offensive line that also, you know, I mean, it really had a lot of talent, but Ty Haywood was that guy. You walk out onto the field, and he quickly passes
the eyeball test, I was going to say.
Easy to identify prospects like him. These are the type of guys that make my job easy.
Oh, absolutely. And Michigan, I feel like Michigan and maybe the Big Ten in general are just known for producing those top-tier, big-bodied linemen, whether on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. I think he's a perfect fit for the Wolverines.
And they also got a commitment from Andrew Marsh. You could watch his live commitment right here on Dave Campbell's Texas Football this year when he committed to the Wolverines. So they are continuing to expand their presence. They always come into Texas and grab a guy here and grab a guy there, but Michigan will continue to have a presence in the Lone Star State moving forward, I think.
And they get Bryce Underwood, too.
Yeah,
quarterback commit.
Zayden Crimpen's another guy to keep an eye on in 2026. He just came off a visit there. So, I mean, plenty of names for Michigan fans to know.
Absolutely. It kind of hurts our Michigan State and Ohio State hearts a little bit. But we still like talking about the Michigan Wolverines here. Let's move it on to another big name in the class of 2025 that we wanted to keep our eye on today, and that's Columbus athlete Grayson Rigden. He announced his commitment earlier this morning. He's going to be playing for the Arizona State Sun Devils in the Big 12. Now, let's recap his recruitment process so far, because I think that's very important to understand the trajectory of his recruitment process throughout his high school career. So, four-time state champion Grayson Rigden, four-time at three different schools. Played a six-man football for the first 3 years of his high school career.
It's important to note there that his father's a coach, too.
His father is a coach as well, yes. He was at Strawn, Benjamin, and then his senior year, before his senior year, ended up transferring to 3A Columbus. Where, of course, he goes on to win another state championship. So he goes 4 for 4. He's a four-time state champion. 1 in 6-man, 3 in 6-man, 1 in 11-man football. Incredibly impressive. So he was committed to play at Air Force for a while when he was, I think it was at Benjamin.
Prior to his senior season.
Prior to him transferring to Columbus, which is where he is at now. He decommits from there, takes an official visit to NC State, really likes NC State, commits there.
Yep.
Backs off a couple of months later, and then commits to Wyoming.
Signed with Wyoming. Because I think he wants to play multiple sports is kind of what I'm hearing. He was talking to Wyoming about playing basketball and football.
Right. Eventually decommits from Wyoming.
He was let out of his letter, I believe, because of a coaching change there from the coach that recruited him.
Right.
I believe that could...
I think you're right.
There could be some gray area there.
And that's kind of the story, I guess, with a lot of these signees that we're talking about today that have just recently signed. A lot of them wanted to get out of that commitment because the coach that recruited him...
Or the head coach was changed.
Was changed, which is, of course, allowed. So he gets let out of his sign with Wyoming, and today commits to Arizona State.
Yeah, big commitment for Arizona State. They came in at the 11th hour, basically, to offer him a scholarship. This was a late in the process offer. He took a last-second official visit this past weekend to Tempe to get a close look at the Sun Devils program. I guess that he liked what he saw because he quickly pulled the trigger. And I think Arizona State fans are going to love this commitment at first glance because he can't help but remind you of Cam Scatabo.
That is the first player I thought of when I saw that.
Because they were both under the radar, right? They're both under the radar, put up monster statistics, and are those types of guys, those types of players who just don't take no for an answer, right? You can't keep Grayson Rigden down, and you couldn't keep Cam Scatabo down. So I'm interested to see, one, is offense his future in Tempe? Because he was being recruited by coaches on both sides of the ball. I'm wanting to play him on offense if it's me, but he could potentially play in the secondary or move down to linebacker. I just personally like him as a running back, and I can't help but draw that comparison in my mind. So that's what I'm looking at. If I'm an ASU fan, I can't wait to see him in the offense. Although I know he could do different things. I'm just going to say I can't wait to see him in the offense.
Well, I think he's got a good build to be a running back too, like you said. I mean, I think he's going to be electric for that offense, and really, really excited to see him at the next level there. One more thing that we want to do before we get into more player news, players that probably already signed before today, but after early national signing. Committed today before today. Let's take a look at Humble ISD. They had a big National Signing Day ceremony today. And our very own Gavin Moritz was actually there at the signing to get a video of all of the prospects that have signed to play at the next level. Thanks again to our friends at Texan Live, Trevor Bullard and Gavin Moritz, for getting that video, which, by the way, Humble ISD, Texan Live.
Yeah.
Texan Live ISD.
Loaded ISD. Arion Wilkins signed with UTEP. Yeah, big commitment or a big signing there for UTEP in a loaded class. We'll get more in depth on that later. And one of my personal sleepers in this class, Hayden Wright. Ended up being a 3-star. Picked up a lot of offers, but he, of course, is now headed to Northwestern to play in the Big Ten. Big commitment for the Wildcats because there were a lot of big programs sniffing around him late in the process. He was one of the top unsigned or top uncommitted guys late in the 2025 season. And we'll talk, like you said, more about UTEP later since they are an in-state program. Incredible class that they've been able to put together. But beforehand, a couple more players to get to here first. Where shall we start? Landon Locke? Yeah, I love Landon Locke. Of course, he's the Rockwall quarterback, brother of Braden Locke, who I believe is at Arizona now. He's at Arizona. So, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about so he was a longtime Wisconsin commit, like his brother. His brother started off at Mississippi State, transferred to Wisconsin. He decommitted, or he transferred to Arizona from Wisconsin, and that's when Landon Locke pulled the plug and said, hey, I
I think there was a couple coaching changes too, because Phil Longo at Wisconsin was let go, and he was his main recruiter there. Ironically, right?
Ironically, now the head coach at Sam Houston.
Correct.
So a pre-existing relationship was there. So when that offer came through, I think that there was probably a sense of relief for Landon, and also for Longo to be able to get one of the top-rated quarterbacks in the Lone Star State in his very first class, because Landon Locke has been a wire-to-wire top 10 QB for us at Dave Campbell's in those 2025 rankings. He did suffer a knee injury this year, which kind of could have potentially slowed his recruitment, but hey, Longo knew him as a player already. It worked out great. I think the question now is going to be, how good is Landon Locke going to become within that offense, and is he the type of guy that Sam Houston can hang on to in the era of the transfer portal? He's that good. Like, he's a guy that you have to worry about potentially leaving, because he's got all the tools. He throws one of the best deep balls, and he has extreme deep ball accuracy with the power to fit it into tight windows. Yeah,
really, really good player, and good get for Sam Houston and Phil Longo there for the Bearcats. Moving on, let's talk about Jaden Bradley of Prosper Rock Hill. Is now signed to play for Texas State, the Bobcats. Big get for him. What I really like about him and watching his tape is that I feel like he's 6'2", 290 pounds, the prototypical next level cornerback, in my opinion.
I love Jaden Bradley. This is a dude who, thanks to Matt Stepp for coining it, he has the dog in him. Every time I've watched him play, he's been the alpha on the field, no matter who else was on the field with him. Even in games where he's playing it on the other sidelines against 5-stars and stuff, Jaden Bradley brings it. And he did a lot for Prosper Rock Hill. Offense, defense, special teams. Whatever they asked of him, he was ready to step up. To me, this is my favorite Texas State signing now, because I think Jaden Bradley could have played for anybody in the country, and at one point he had an Oklahoma offer. So, this is a huge get for the Bobcats.
Well, he was actually committed to play at Houston for a while, and then decommitted, obviously, and is now ending up at Texas State. So super pumped for him. That's a big get. Sawyer Anderson, Parish Episcopal quarterback, commits to Arizona. 5'11", 177 pounds, threw for over 14,000 yards in his high school career and 158 touchdowns. And kind of like Landon Locke, he was previously committed to play for Purdue. And when they had a couple of coaching changes, of course, Ryan Walters, the former head coach, is fired, and Graham Harrell, the former OC and quarterbacks coach, also left, is now at Abilene Christian, I believe. Graham Harrell's at Abilene Christian. Yeah.
Credit to Corey Hogue for breaking that news.
Correct. Yeah, good. Shout out Corey Hogue. Obviously, he decided to take his recruitment process in a different direction.
Yep.
And now he's going to end up at Arizona.
I brought my computer in just to make sure that I had Sawyer's stats, because to me,
very impressive.
To me, he's the most prolific private school player in Texas history. 3-time state champion. And just listen to these numbers. You mentioned like his career statistics. 255 of 394 this season. 5,070 yards and 49 touchdowns in one season.
Yeah, in one season.
In one season. So a prolific player. I'm going to have a lot of fun watching him, and I have to say it's been fun watching his development at Parish Episcopal over the years, because he started as a freshman.
Yeah.
So he's been there. He's been a guy that we've been used to like having to go watch on Friday night.
Right, and it's like, who's next in line? Yeah, we've been watching for him so long.
Parish, but Arizona got, I feel like, one of the top steals in this class. I think he's the type of guy that has the moxie to be one of these type of names that grows into a national thing at one point, because he just picks people apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to Jaden Jackson of Franklin. I don't want to say he broke out during the state championships his sophomore year, but I think that's when he came onto the scene.
Well, Bryson Washington was on that team.
He was, and now he's at Baylor.
So that's like a lot of people were watching Bryson Washington, but Jaden Jackson like kind of stole the show.
Right, exactly. Obviously, Bryson Washington, backstory, Franklin, if you don't know, runs the slot T. Very heavy into the running back scene, right? Yep. They're big ground and pound, run the ball.
For sure.
And I don't care how much you say, they don't produce college players anymore?
Heck,
they
do.
absolutely do.
Yeah, for sure.
No matter what you think. So Jaden Jackson, kind of that next in line to Bryson Washington. Big-bodied, 5'10", 217, excuse me, not 270, 217 pounds. Just I don't know how to describe him other than like a freight train.
Bruiser.
I mean, watching him during that state championship game in 2022 against Brock, he easily stood out onto the field to me, and all of our eyes went straight to Jaden Jackson.
Iowa State fans are going to love him because he's
Iowa
a
State,
guy.
by the way.
He's a guy who's going to run over you versus running around you most of the time. And you need those guys in the offense right now because when it gets down inside the 5-yard line, it's tough to score in college football. And I can't think of a better program that could potentially feature him better because they will get him touches. And I think he's a guy that another one of these Texas high school football greats that goes under the radar as far as big colleges are concerned. And then you see an Iowa State come in and secure his signing / commitment at the last second and gets a guy that's like, oh, well, where did this guy come from? We know about him because we're Texas high school football fans. But I think on the national scale, he's just not going to be that well known of a name. But I think that he's going to make an impact at the next level.
Well, it's kind of like a Grayson Rigden and Cam Scadabo situation, right?
Well,
I mean, guys that fly under the radar, but probably are going to have a successful collegiate career.
I guess as we think about it, Matt Campbell was like that blue collar style of offense. And I think Jaden Jackson fits in perfectly with that.
Yes, I completely agree with you. One more player I wanted to mention before we move on to talk about the 13 FBS teams in the state of Texas, and that's Cornelius Warren, North Crowley running back. So for a while, he was committed to UNLV. I think he actually signed with UNLV on signing day, early signing day, when Crowley had their historic class of like 9 players signed at the FBS level. Absolutely incredible. Texan Live School, by the way. But of course, Barry Odom left, and he's now the head coach at Purdue.
Right.
He was the head coach at UNLV beforehand. He obviously takes a step back and now is committed to play for Arizona. Another Arizona commit.
Yeah, I think Cornelius Warren proved his mettle throughout the course of his senior season. He dealt with some injuries throughout the course of his career at North Crowley. He came through with a tremendous senior season, and I don't know if North Crowley hoists that trophy without Cornelius Warren.
No.
Because Quentin Gibson had a tremendous state championship game, but I think there's an argument to be made that Cornelius Warren played even better. He had a remarkable game on the grandest stage, and he earned what he got, and that's a chance at the P4 level, and that he's going to be playing now in the Big 12. So we're going to get a chance to watch him up close in person, especially when he comes back to Texas to play some of these teams, and I'm hype about that.
It seems like a lot of these Texas players getting pulled in by Arizona here at the last minute, and I think it's because of that hiring of Seth Doge.
One of the sleepers in college football, they have a heavy Texas high school football presence on their roster.
They sure
I think that
do.
they had over 20 players last year that were from Texas. So it's just something to keep an eye on. It's like one of those sneaky hot schools in the Lone Star State.
Yeah. They're an honorary Texas school.
Yeah, there you go.
It's kind of like Oklahoma. We have a couple of those like honorary Texas schools. One of them's Oklahoma. Probably another one's going to be Arizona because they have so many Texas high school football commits or players on their roster. But anyways, I digress. So there you go. There's a couple of important players that we thought it would be good to keep your eye on for today.
Yeah, we wanted to show some love to these guys. Some of these guys that made their commitments from the early signing period now until the official national signing day. Sometimes these players get lost in the wash because a lot of these big teams are turning the page, but these are guys that you should know about if you're a fan of these college programs. And Texas high school football fans are well familiar with them. So if you're a fan of one of these out-of-state programs or in-state programs that signed one of these guys and you didn't know about it, there's a reason to be really excited about your haul today in February.
So there you go. A couple of players to watch around the state of Texas, putting pen to paper today to officially mark their next move up into the collegiate level. So congratulations to them. Before we move on to talk about the 13 FBS teams in the state of Texas in a little bit more depth, we just want to remind you that here at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, we do something every once in a while called live commitments.
Sure.
In our studio. If you are a player in the state of Texas 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, and you want to commit live in our studios here in Lewisville, Texas, we welcome you. I mean, we've had a couple of commits so far that have been successful. Malik Hawkins, now at Oklahoma.
Let Mallory Hartley be the host of your commitment, and then I'll break down all your skills.
Yeah, it'll be fun. You can reach out to us over email, via Twitter, whatever works best for you. But we would love to host you and your families here, even friends, here at the Dave Campbell's Texas Football Studios in Lewisville, Texas, and make your day just, a little bit more special in that way. So if you want to commit, reach out. Join us. Let us know. All right, Powers. Shall we move on and talk about
the meat and potatoes?
The meat and potatoes,
yeah. This is the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll start off here with probably the obvious, the Texas Longhorns. They officially signed the #1 overall class in 2025, and this class is just impressive. I mean, from top to bottom. I could go off. I've got a list here, obviously, of some of the top players.
I'm going to cheat off your notes.
There's Michael Terry.
Yeah.
Lance Jackson, who's one of your favorites from Pleasant Grove. Khalik Lockett from Saxe. Elijah Barnes. Jamie French, who's out of state. He's from Florida, but he's one of the best players in this class, in my opinion. Galveston Ball safety Jonah Williams, who's the cover of our Rising magazine this year. Just a plethora of top dudes with just extreme talent.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think when we were doing the National Signing Day show, the early signing day show back in December, it was still up in the air whether Texas was going to secure the #1 class or not. But by the end of the day, the dust had settled and Texas had came to the top. And now they've cemented themselves as the #1 program, not only in the Lone Star State as it relates to recruiting, but the entire country, which is a monumental thing to pull off for Steve Sarkisian and his staff. As a matter of fact, Texas wide receivers coach Chris Jackson was named the National Recruiter of the Year by one of the major outlets this morning. So he did a tremendous job pulling in Khalik Lockett. That's the kind of the position group that jumps out to me, because I think Khalik Lockett is the type of guy that can come in and Jamie French right away and potentially bolster that wide receiver room, because they're going to miss some guys from last year's squad. And they're going to need somebody to step in. And they may address those needs in the transfer portal too. But these are two freshmen that can be day one guys. And because of his skill set, I think Jonah Williams is another guy that can come in early and compete. I at least think that he's going to be a special teams contributor. But he's so versatile that he could really plug and play into a number of different spots. And if they have a hole, safety, nickel, maybe even like as a rover, if he gains the right type of weight, return man, even as like a gunner, I think that Jonah Williams could be that guy. Well,
and then I don't remember what class they signed last year. Do you remember what they were overall last year?
They were a top 5.
They were a top 5, but being #1 feels monumental.
It's big.
Like you said, right?
It's big.
And of course, moving to the SEC this year, being successful, playing in an SEC championship, making it to the third round of the college football playoff, excuse me. It seems like all of the cards are falling into the right place for the Longhorns.
Sark's building a behemoth down there. It's going to be a program that is in the national title hunt based on the talent that's coming in, because the one thing that I feel like their staff has done better than previous staffs is develop that talent, because now you're hearing these guys get drafted in the first round again. There's Texas Longhorns up and down the NFL draft over the last couple of years. And I think the last 2 signing classes, because that's kind of how you really have to look at it. You really aren't going to build a program off of one signing class. You're going to have to put multiple signing classes together. And if I look at the players that came in last year combined with the players that came in this year, I think the Longhorns are going to be in that college football playoff hunt every single year. It's actually going to be a surprise when they don't make it versus when they do.
Right. I think so too. Well, and it's also going to be a surprise if they're not in the top 5 in their signing classes here in the next couple of years, right? That's just kind of an expectation for them at this point.
Well, it's just a powerhouse based on the NIL potential there, the NIL success that they've had with their big players, and the marquee names that they're bringing in. Austin is also a pretty cool place for a college player from out of state to come visit, and it's centrally located in state.
Right. Sticking with the SEC, let's talk about the Texas A&M Aggies. They finished 9th overall in the class of 2025. They personally have one of my favorites.
I know who you're going to say.
Who?
Keati Armstrong.
Yeah, Jasper tight end. Dude's insane. One of the best tight ends I've ever seen in the state of Texas. But, I mean, from top to bottom, I would say just like the Texas Longhorns, Belleville defensive lineman DJ Sanders.
Monster.
Obviously, Keati Armstrong. Kelshawn Johnson from Hitchcock, who was a big contributor this year. Speed Demon, yeah. And then, honestly, I love DeAndre Tiger Rigden, too, from DeSoto. I mean, from top to bottom, like I said, this class is star-studded.
I love it because they took players from in-state and out-of-state. They put a good mix together. They left room to add transfer portal players. But the high school players that they did take in this cycle are quality players, but they're also quality off of the field. They're team leader types. They're guys who people rally around. Kelvion Riggins, Tiger Rigden, Keati Armstrong was the leader on Jasper this year. DJ Sanders has been the guy at Belleville. These are all big-time players who have a pedigree that you can respect when they're not on the gridiron. And that's what I love about what Mike Elko and his staff is building in College Station. And I'm not going to throw shade on what anybody did in prior years or any other coach that's been there, but this staff is bringing a different feeling to the Texas high school football community. That's my opinion. I think that they're being well received by the Texas high school coaches, and I think that they're going to be a force with top players in the battle between Texas and Texas A&M for in-state recruits moving forward from this moment into 2026 and into 2027. It was fun this year.
Oh, yeah.
Like DJ Sanders was a hotly contested recruit. Keati Armstrong's teammate, Ty Anthony Smith, signed with Texas last year when he flipped from Texas A&M. So these are big wins for Texas A&M. But moving forward, it's going to be so fun to watch and for us to cover it.
Well, even that Texas A&M Texas game this year, you had that game was just riddled with Texas high school, not even just Texas high, but high school prospects all across the nation that probably had an offer from Texas too. That was hosted at Kyle Field, but all of those players probably had an offer from Texas too. So it just makes this rivalry that much better that they finished in the top 10 in the class of 2025, both in the SEC now. It's a rivalry that will live on for a long time. And we're, like you said, excited to cover it here.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch the games, but I'm also excited to cover the recruiting battles because they're going to be endless and it's going to be bountiful for us to cover it.
All right, moving on to the Big 12, shall we? Let's start off with TCU, the TCU Horned Frogs. They grabbed the #1 class in the Big 12. And looking at this class from top to bottom, it's very easy to see why. And it's a lot of these players that maybe don't come into like the national eye as much, but players that we know are absolute dogs in the Texas high school football world. Like one, I think quarterback from Columbus, Adam Schobel, who is a legacy, TCU legacy with his dad and his uncle, obviously playing at TCU back in the day and having successful careers there. He actually did flip several times from Oklahoma State. He was committed to Baylor at first, flipped to Oklahoma State, and officially signed with TCU. Big get for them, especially because I think they lost Ty Hawkins, who was the quarterback at IMG this past year, formerly at Johnson down in San Antonio. He flipped to SMU. But I think that was a big get in place of Ty Hawkins' decommitment. It
was nice to be able to backfill's not the right word because Adam Schobel was Mr. Texas Football Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Backfill's not the right word.
No.
But he's a TCU legacy.
Yes. And I think they were hoping to get his commitment. Right. And then obviously I think the Ty Hawkins thing was kind of like the flip, right?
He's going to be in the TCU program with his cousin John Schobel.
Yes.
They both signed from Columbus to play for the Horned Frogs. And I think that they both add a certain element to both sides of the ball because John plays tight end and defensive end, and I think he's probably best suited for defense moving forward. I bet Adam would be really happy to have him on offense. Mm-hmm. And Adam he's an absolute gunslinger, but he has the frame and potential to develop into a first-round pick one day. Mm-hmm. You can't coach 6'4.5" or 6'5". You know, he has something that not a lot of quarterbacks have. Also, it's great for him to have won a state championship.
Yes.
And I think a lot of doubters would look and say, oh, well, he didn't play at the 6A or 5A level. I'd like to silence those critics in this regard. The district that he plays in is loaded with talent. So it's not like your typical small school Texas district. It's one of the most powerful small school districts in the nation.
Yeah.
And I think that if you took Columbus and put them against some of the top teams in Oklahoma, that they would they would certainly hold their own. So don't worry about that. Adam Schobel, 4-year varsity starter, will enter Fort Worth battle tested.
Couple other names to note too. Summer Creek defensive end Chad Woodford, who's one of your favorites. He is a beast.
You're not going to find a more imposing physical specimen.
No. Austin Anderson, wide receiver Ed Small. I know I've watched him on tape a couple of times. Some of the strongest hands that I've seen. Maybe not typical wide receiver size, but like some of the strongest hands I've seen on tape in a while.
Tremendous athlete. He's a 4. I have him as a 4-star. I think that Ed Small is going to be the surprise of this class.
Yeah.
I think that Ed Small is the type of guy that could have a Puka Nacua-esque type of trajectory. And I know that Puka caught on, really well in the national spotlight once he made it to the league and stuff. But he was good at BYU, and like a lot of people knew about him, but not as some of the other big-time guys. And that's why he was a later round draft pick. I think Ed Small can have that type of effect in the Big 12. I think he's a needle mover.
I think so too. And Jacoby Hayes.
Yeah, Jacoby Hayes.
Love Jacoby Hayes. Flipped from North Texas to play at TCU. It did hurt because I got to see him in person this year against Mansfield, played Crowley, and he went off 3 or 4 touchdowns in that game. Mansfield ended up losing that game, but he was the star of the show. And there were a couple of, I think Keenan Hall was there from Baylor. Yeah. There was a Texas Tech coach there as well. So I knew he probably wasn't going to stick with the Mean Green for long, but I'm glad that he's still landed in the DFW area.
I think TCU fans are going to love Logan Schramm too, because the Bernie offensive lineman is one of these guys who just smashes people.
Yeah.
And he's huge. So I think he's like a guy that TCU fans could fall in love with in time.
I think so too. Sticking with the Big 12 here, a couple more. Baylor, they finished 3rd in the Big 12, and they were 13th last year.
Huge jump.
Their class of 2024 was 13th. Now they're at number 3. And when you look at the list from top to bottom, it's easy to understand why. And it all has to start with Red Oak wide receiver Taz Williams Jr.
Most offered player in the class of 2025 in the Lone Star State. Baylor beat out some major programs for him. He also had one of the funnest signings that we attended, another one that we did live here at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. So if you do want to make your live commitment, get in line. We'll make your day a little bit more special. He was a surprise in this Baylor class. Baylor wasn't even one of his finalists at the announcement, so it was like a shocker.
Did he have the wheel? He have the wheel thing?
He spun the wheel. But Baylor wasn't one of the schools on the wheel. It was behind the wheel, so after he spun the wheel, he turned it around, and it revealed that it was Baylor. But that was like a big jumping off point for Baylor, because the week before, they landed a 4-star defensive end, Kamarian Morgan from South Oak Cliff, who is a good pass rushing presence, a guy that I think Dave Aranda can build into an elite edge rusher in college football. They were really tight, and they then became the ringleaders of this class, and that helped reel in some other big fish down the stretch and help them rise up the recruiting ranks to number 3. I think I'd be remiss not to at least shout out Keenan Hall, who did a tremendous job with
excellent recruiter.
Did a tremendous job with building some of these relationships that help push this thing forward a little bit. And you know what? Winning helps too. And Dave Aranda had a bounce back year this year as the head coach, and Baylor played above what we thought heading in that they would be. So, I mean, they're just better than we thought.
And a couple of other names to note: Kamarian Morgan out of South Oak Cliff, Richland running back Michael Turner Jr. I saw him a couple of times. He's kind of a beast there. Caleb Burns, which you made a 4-star in the DCTF rankings. And then I also wanted to mention too, before we move on from Baylor, you mentioned this with Texas too. And to be a powerhouse program, you have to have a couple of signing classes. You put them together, right?
Right.
A couple of powerhouse signing classes, putting them all together and making the magic happen, right? I kind of think that's what Baylor's doing right now. Obviously, 3rd in the Big 12 for the class of 2025, but the class of 2026 is off to a hot start for them. And I think that they're kind of they're not only trending upwards, they might be going at a 90-degree angle.
I agree with that. I mean, I think they were the biggest turnaround in this cycle. Plus, They've stayed hot on the recruiting trail with big-time commitments in 2026 already from Waco natives, London Smith and Jamarian Vincent. Also, you throw into the mix, like a Rylan Morris, and things are starting to hit on all cylinders, I feel like. I love that they're offensive players mostly. I mean, Jamarian Vincent is going to project as a defensive back, but they've got some big-time commitments on the offensive side of the ball, and Aranda's known as a defensive coach. So if they can meld all that together and keep it rolling, then Baylor also centrally located with good donors.
Yes.
And I think that they leaned into the we pay players thing this year, and that helped them too, because they were known as a school for a while there that you didn't want to go to, or you might not consider going to, over some other teams that might pay you more. So they changed the ideology of this class.
Right. I just felt like they've been so traditional for a long time, not developing with the times, but this year it did seem a little bit different, and now they're able to keep some of those big time prospects at home in the class of 2026 so far. Let's move on to SMU. SMU finishing 5th in the ACC. And I kind of wanted to pose the question to you. How do you think moving to a Power 4 conference, and I guess now, it probably doesn't make that much of a difference now, but making the college football playoff helped this 2025 class? Most of these guys already signed way before they even made the college football playoff, probably made their decision based off of, hey, they're moving to a Power 4 conference.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that the college football playoff showing should help them into the next cycle more than it did in this cycle, because they took a smaller signing class this year of high school players, and they've been doing that because they're
a portal school, really.
It looks like they're trying to hit like 50-50 or 70-30 high school to transfer portal based on any given year. And they've had so much success in the transfer portal that you can start to pinpoint like them as one of the elite schools nationally in that regard. But I love what they do at the high school level. Dramad Odoms, the offensive tackle from Houston Lamar. This is a kid who earned 5-star status at 24/7 Sports after a strong showing at the Navy All-American Bowl. He's the number 22 prospect in DCTF rankings, and he has a tremendously high upside, especially as a left tackle who projects as a guy that could be a true blindside protector, which there's a lot of offensive linemen that come out of the Lone Star State, but not all of them have true left tackle potential. He's one.
Couple other guys, Jalen Cooper, who you just made a 4-star out of Cibolo Steel. Yeah, really impressive player. Jameco Green, I think, has been really impressive. This to me just feels like a different type of class for SMU than in years past.
I agree with that. But Rhett Lashley's done a fairly consistent job. If I would look at one of these programs, now Texas has started to pile together some elite recruiting classes, and if that is like your standard of, being consistent, that's hard to keep up with. But Rhett Lashley has done a consistent job there year over year, not only finding great high school players, but also finding instant impact transfer players that help get them to the promised land this year. Now, I know they want to take the next step, right? The next step is to win a playoff game, potentially compete for a national championship. So we'll see how this group mixes in with what they already have on campus and see how that squad shapes up for next season.
Yeah, I'm just reading through some of these names, and like Dalen Singleton, I think Zay Gentry too, out of Anna, who was formerly at McKinney. We've watched him for a long, really fun dudes, like football playing dudes. Yeah, really enjoy this class for SMU in the 2025 recruiting cycle. Let's jump to G5 real quick. And we got to talk about UTEP, man. The UTEP Miners, they finished number 1 overall in Conference USA, pulling in a plethora of dudes all across the state of Texas. And I asked Scotty Walden about this too. I asked him, I was like, it seems like to me you guys really focused on like the pass catchers to me. And he was like, yeah, like we needed dudes at that position.
Yeah. They did a tremendous job at wide receiver in this class. Linebacker, those were 2 position groups that really jumped out at me as I evaluated things. But top to bottom, what I think is most fun about UTEP, they recruit the heck out of all these Texas players. Like the Texas players who we identify as like, oh, these guys are fun, or these guys may slide under the radar. Who's going to...
They're ball playing dudes.
Yeah,
that's who they go for.
Yeah, and I love that. That, to me, changed the way I felt about the 2025 cycle, because you have now a program at the G5 level that's given opportunities to guys that wasn't getting them. Because UTEP was offering a ton of out-of-state JUCO players underneath the previous staff. Now they're recruiting Texas high school football players and using the portal, but they've signed over 25 players back-to-back classes. So, I mean, it's just been a lot of fun to watch.
Well, and to go along with those pass catchers, they hit the portal hard this year, and they were able to bring in former 5-star out of high school quarterback Malachi Nelson from Boise State. That, to me, when that news broke...
That's big news.
For you to... I was like, wow, what a get for Scotty Walden and company.
Add him to the in-state passers of 2025. They're going to be so fun to watch. Like, there's a group in Texas now. All the arms in Texas is just, we just got to sit back, buy tickets, and watch what these guys do, because that's going to make our offenses pop, and I'm excited for it. I'm just excited to see what he does in that.
I am too.
I am too. When I watched UTEP, it was fun to see like the hype that the team had.
Yeah. Well, there's a different kind of feel. And we talked to Scotty Walden about this when we had him on our early National Signing Day special. It feels like the energy and the aura around the program this past year is just so much different. And it's trending in a positive way,
Agreed.
I would say.
Yeah. They're just fun for me. I'm going to be I'm going to be a low-key UTEP fan. That's all right. I'm a fan of all these teams, but I just like the hype and energy that they have.
Yeah. We claim different teams every year. So, next year might be a different team, but we love all of our teams in the state of Texas. Let's go back to the Big 12, and we'll talk about Houston. They signed a pretty impressive class. They ranked 56th overall in the class of 2025. Couple of guys to note here: Jasper offensive tackle Demetrius Dean II, which I know you are a big fan on. I really liked Fort Bend Ridgepoint quarterback Austin Carlisle. We talked about him earlier on in the season, but he's a true gunslinger. And then I really liked wide receiver Jaquise Martin from Brian Rudder. I mean, Rudder had a phenomenal year this year, and Jaquise Martin was a huge reason for that. Yeah,
no doubt about it. I mean, just from top to bottom, this is another class. I think what you're going to find out with Houston is that they are going to take a unique approach to the recruiting process. They're going to not be like standardized to fitting in with your traditional recruiting rankings. They recruit very well to a system due to fit into that system and projectable upside. I think those are the things that they're looking for when they hit the recruiting trail in the Lone Star State. They're going to mix in guys from Louisiana and some of these other territories that Coach Fritz has had success in before he came back to Texas. The transfer portal stuff is going to be big for them. And that's what I wanted to bring up next was, yes, I think the class looks really, really good as a whole, but when you look at who they've been able to bring in via transfer portal, one of them, of course, we got to talk about Connor Wigman, former Texas A&M quarterback and former Dave Campbell's cover boy. I don't know if it's behind me. That is not behind me. It should be right. Hopefully it was right. Hopefully during this time of the year it's rising. It is. It's rising. Yeah, it's rising right now. But former Dave Campbell's Texas football cover boy. And then of note, Dean Connors, Rice's incredible running back this past year. He transfers to Houston too. Just two really good offensive players that can make an immediate impact, I think, in this Houston offense. Yeah, Wegman, of course, is the marquee name, a guy that you feel like is going to take reins of that offense instantly. So I'm just really interested to see these guys, because these now that they're hitting into year number 2, these are the guys that are going to actually put their fingerprints on the program, and you will be starting to realize what the UH program is about underneath the Coach Fritz. Now that he's starting to have... These are his guys now, he's got 2 classes, 2 full transfer portal classes. And in today's college football, it's sped up. It used to be like, oh, you need 3 or 4 years. I think now on year 2, you got to start making your judgments. So this is really going to be their team now, and I'll be interested to see how it goes. Another thing that I think is impressive is they had 9 early enrollees. So 9 of those players some of those top players that we talked about are already on campus from the high school ranks, and that helps them get a head start on their college careers. I think so too. We'll round out the Big 12 here with the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Kind of the same situation as Houston was in. They put together a pretty good class of 2025, but they bring in 17 transfer portal players, and they currently rank 3rd
in the transfer portal, which is and the guys that they've been able to bring into, not necessarily like you've got Quentin Joyner, right, the running back from USC, a skill player, but what they I think really focused on in terms of the portal were in the trenches. The offensive line and the defensive line, they were able to bring in top tier lineman play from all across the nation.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I love the addition of Connor Carty late in the process. He was a one-time Texas A&M commit, decommitted from Texas A&M on National Signing Day in the early signing period. And I believe he inked with Texas Tech on the Friday right before everything went quiet when you can't sign anymore. I think that he is a guy that could play center or offensive guard, so I love his roster flex. Also has a strong relationship with Ellis Davis, who they signed the year prior, and has a connection to Prosper that's going to continue to crank out elite offensive line prospects. Moving ahead into this class, they have 3 of them: Zayden Crimpin, Bryce Gilmore, and Sean Stover. Texas Tech could be a player for any of those, and it's nice to have some of their former teammates on campus already to tell them about what Rickham's about. My takeaway from this Texas Tech class, to not really jump into something completely different, but I'm going to, my takeaway from this Texas Tech class is looking at the transfer portal, seeing that they're number 3, but where those guys come from. Because when this transfer portal stuff first started, we were thinking, all right, you recruit the Texas kids coming out of high school, then when they want to transfer and they didn't come to you, maybe you have a chance at a second shot at them. And that's true. But these teams are now able to secure transfer portal commitments from anywhere. Like looking at Texas Tech's they're from all over the country. And I think that's a very important, because that signifies that they're recruiting guys that they need to fit in because they need the depth at these positions, and they've identified which one of those guys would be best. And no matter where they fall in the transfer portal rankings or power rankings of these players leaving their teams, I think it's better if you fit the schemes if you're transferring.
100%. Because
if you don't, you're still going to be in the same type of situation that you were in before you transferred. So I think Texas Tech is nailing that. Not only being in the top 3, that's big, but also getting the right guys. Because I think Texas Tech is one of those teams that has a chance to break out next year. That's my
I completely agree.
Breakout pick for next year. I think Texas Tech could be a player on the national scene.
I think I completely agree with you. They hit the portal in the right places, and they have the key players coming in the 2025 that can kind of provide that depth, like you said. Let's talk about North Texas real quick. Couple of quick hitters here. Quick hitters.
Yep.
That's a tongue twister. I can't get to it. Who was your favorite signee from the North Texas 2025 class, or maybe the player that will have the most roster value at the end of this season?
Boy, that's a tough one, and I feel like I knew who it was yesterday, and I don't know who it is today. I mean, my favorite signing is going to be Chris Jimerson.
Chris Jimerson has to be.
Yeah, because he's so fun to watch. I love that he took a chance on betting on himself to play quarterback at the next level. UNT's going to give him the opportunity to do that. I think Tyler Brown from Aubrey is a guy that
is a good
flew
one too.
Under the radar
wide receiver
because of his speed. He's going to be a slot wide receiver at the next level, but that's just as important as any other position 100%. On the field, maybe even more so in today's fast-paced college game. I think he's a guy that people could have been sleeping on that could make a big impact. Okay,
give me your favorite signee from the UTSA 2025 class.
Oh, that's really tough, but I'm going to go with Max Gerlich. He bounced back from an injury his junior season to earn a lot of scholarship offers, ended up picking UTSA, not really staying home, but staying really close to home to play for Jeff Traylor. I love his moxie, and I love his ability to press the action. He's not afraid to pull the trigger and try to put the ball into tight windows. I also personally think he has the arm talent that makes him a high ceiling quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses within that scheme.
And then with Rice, give me your sleeper pick for the class of 2025. Who do you think is going to break out?
I'm a big Coulter Alberton guy, but I'm going with Ty Tames.
Yep. Yeah.
From Smith.
Wimberley.
From where?
Wimberley.
From Wimberley.
Too many names. Too many
blues.
Oh, I know. Too many blues down in that area, but I agree with you.
Wimberley's Ty Tames, like if you pop his tape on, he's a little skinny, But, oh my gosh, he will knock your face off.
He's fast.
Both of those guys are those type of dudes. I went to the Allen game, and Coulter Alberding had as many pancakes as Prosper's offensive line.
Yeah.
And that impressed me because everybody on Prosper's offensive front were like FBS P4 guys, but Coulter Alberding dominated, and he was putting dudes in the dirt constantly. And Ty Tames just obliterates ball carries. When you add 25 pounds to his frame, I think he's an elite college guy.
I think so too. I think I like Rice's class a lot. If I had to pick a class that might go a little bit under the radar, I really like the dudes that Rice has been able to pull in. Obviously, there was a couple of coaching changes
they did a
this
good job.
year. But I was going to say, I think they did a great job putting together a class of 2025 and hitting those key points.
They kept those guys committed through the transition.
Right.
So I think that's very important because at Rice, it's really difficult to recruit because you have to recruit to a certain academic standard, and there's only X amount of those guys available.
Well, and right down the road, you've got a P4 school in the University of Houston. So, I completely agree with you there. But I think that's it. Do you have any other notes on this beautiful 2025 National Signing Day?
I think we'll turn the page to 2026, right?
Yep.
Like we're going to be turning the page of 2026 quickly. My takeaway is recruiting never sleeps.
No.
Recruiting never sleeps. And Texas got a 2026 commitment today already for Max Wright at Melissa.
Yep.
And, the wheels are turning on a lot of these big programs. And we're about to drop our top 10 in the class of 2026. So stay tuned for that because we're just going to keep grinding content over here.
Just going to keep grinding content. And that was one of the things that I learned from transitioning over to more of a recruiting role, a video recruiting role, is that it never sleeps. It never sleeps. I was up at, I get up early every morning, but I was on Twitter constantly this morning looking for Ty Haywood's commitment. I was like, I've got to see if it's official. I got to see if it's official. But that's what we signed up for, right?
That's what I signed up for, and I know now that's what you signed up for, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun covering it with you. I can't wait to what 2025 has in store for us in the class of 2026 and beyond in Texas.
I think so too. This gives a thumbs up, a thumb, or whatever, bump, thump, whatever it's called.
Fist bump.
Fist bump. I could not think of the name, but we appreciate you guys joining us here for National Signing Day, the class of 2025. We put a bow on officially the class of 2025, and we can start now looking at the class of 2026. Congratulations to all the prospects that signed today to play at the next level. We wish you the best of luck here at Dave Campbell's Texas Football and can't wait to see you crush it at the next level. For Greg Powers, I'm Mallory Hartley, Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We'll see you next signing day for the class of 2026. But we'll be around. TexasFootball.com/recruiting.